Hey everyone, my name is Marco Gonzalez, and I've known Mr. Lawrence there since kindergarten, if you can believe that. Isn't that incredible? So he asked me to talk to you guys about a career in broadcasting and as a reporter and producer. I started years and years ago, right out of college, and I'd be happy to tell you how that all happened. So I went to University of California at Santa Barbara, and I ended up interning for a show called Access Hollywood. So twice a week, I would drive from Santa Barbara all the way to Burbank, and that was about a 2-hour drive. So I was very committed to get into this business. It's extremely competitive, and you really, really have to do your best to get your name out there and get yourself out there. So that's what I did. So after I graduated from UCSB in 1999, I ended up getting hired by Access Hollywood, and I worked there for 4 years as a field producer. So what does a field producer do? Well, a field producer gathers the stories. In this case, it was all entertainment news. So we would talk to the publicists, and those are people who handle individual stars, and they organize that particular star's schedule. So we would talk to those publicists, and they would tell us when that individual is available for an interview, and then we would go out and do the interview, whether it was on the red carpet or whether it was on the set of a movie or a music video. So that's what I did there at Access Hollywood. And Access Hollywood is a national show, so that is something that is all around the world. People can watch it from anywhere. That's very different from a local broadcast, and I'll tell you about that in a second. So after Access Hollywood, after being there for 4 years, I decided that I wanted to try to be an on-camera reporter. So I did not really have experience being on camera. So I thought, I'm gonna try this. And when it comes to the news markets, you have to start at a very, very small area. And by small market, I mean somewhere that isn't like Los Angeles or isn't like New York. So I decided to go to Arizona. I went to a place called Yuma, Arizona. It's a great city, but it's very small. But it still had, quite a bit of viewership for the broadcast. So I started there as a reporter. And, one of the questions on this paper that Mr. Lawrence gave me about explaining the different parts of the crew that put on a broadcast, there are so many. There's not just the reporter or the news anchor who you see. There are editors who put together all the stories. There are producers who make sure the show is flowing correctly. There are the people that take in feeds from network news, and by feeds I mean footage from the nightly news with Lester Holt in NBC or CBS or ABC. So there's a lot of people involved in putting together a newscast, which is an incredible thing. So going back to my story, so I ended up going to Yuma, Arizona, and I started as just a reporter. And one day the morning anchor wasn't able to come to work, so they had me fill in. Well, I ended up having great chemistry with the female morning anchor, and so I became the new morning anchor for the station. And so I did that for 2 years, and that was a lot of fun. I enjoyed, just waking up with all the viewers. And I'm telling you, to be a morning anchor, you have to get up really, really early. I had to get up every day at 3:30 in the morning. Can you believe that? 3:30, which means you have to go to bed about 7 o'clock, which is not normal, but for this kind of a job, you just have to do it. So I would wake up at 3:30. I would get to the station at about 4:15. We would prep the show, meaning we would make sure we know all of our stories and make sure they read correctly. Because once the producer gives the news anchor the scripts, and this goes for current times, the news anchor then has to read the copy on the script to make sure that they understand how to pronounce things. They understand just the story they're reading. They can't just go out and read without knowing what they're talking about. So it takes a while. You have to proofread all of your scripts, and then once you do that, then you're ready for air. And then you have to put on a little bit of powder, and yes, guys do that too, just so you're not shiny on camera. Girls obviously put on a little bit more makeup, and then you have to get on set. You put on a little earpiece to make sure that you can hear in the control room. You can hear your producer who's giving you little things to say or updates on a story. And so you're hearing that in your ear while you're talking. So when you're watching tonight, when you're watching your local news there at home, realize that all those anchors on the set have an earpiece, and they're hearing somebody talking to them about either, we're changing the story or, all that kind of stuff. So it says here, I talked about how I got started. Training for this position. You really don't. I mean, you learn about communications in college, which is effectively how to communicate with people. But as far as, getting in front of the camera and being comfortable, it takes practice, and it takes, long days and a lot of commitment. So that's why you start in a small market. So your viewership, your people who are watching, you're not broadcasting to a ton of people. I mean, you still have a lot of people, but that way you can get your skills down. That way when you get to LA or you get to New York, where there are millions of people watching, you know what you're doing and you sound confident in what you're saying. So that does take time. So there really isn't on-the-job training. It's just kind of experience that you get from having that position. So what makes a good story? To me, it's about emotion. You want to capture somebody's feeling. You don't just want to put, this happened and that happened and this happened, and because that's just kind of like, that could be boring. For instance, let me give you an example. If you were I did a story once and it was horrible. A helicopter actually crashed into a community of homes, and it was horrific. And after the crash, I went to the scene, and I could have just said, the helicopter crashed into the house and there was fire and this and that, but I wanted to know how the neighbors felt about being so close to an airport, and airplanes fly over their house all the time. And so I wanted to get the emotion from them. So you don't just ever want to ask a yes or no question, like, were you scared? Okay, they could say yes, or they could say no. What you want to say is something that leads into them giving a longer answer. So one of those examples would be, tell me how it felt when you heard that loud noise over your house, and then suddenly this huge explosion. How did you feel? Okay, so that answer isn't a yes or no question. You're going to get something from them. So when you get an answer like that, that is what makes a good story, because you end up getting more insight into the story. By insight, I mean you feel like you were there, and that's what you want. That's what I've always strived for when it comes to telling a story. So to me, that's very, very important. And I learned that early on, and I carried that through all the way till I became a reporter at KTLA here in Los Angeles. So and as I'm talking about helicopters, I actually see one flying over as we speak here. So the difference between a local newspaper and a national newspaper. Okay, so a local newspaper, those tell you about what's happening in your community. So, if there's a barbecue happening, or if there's a festival, or a fundraiser, that kind of thing. A national magazine or a national newspaper talks about things that are happening around the world. So there could be something happening in New York, there could be something happening in Zimbabwe. I mean, we're talking national news. So everybody is involved in this. So it's not just your city or your local community. So that's the difference between those two things. Also, it says here, what makes a good story, and we talked about the difference between a national and a local report. And just to conclude, it's all about being credible. You don't want to ever make up something, or if you don't really know, just go, I'll just figure it out, or I'll just say whatever I want to say. You can't do that, because what that does is that tells people that they can't believe you. And when it comes to the news, you want to be credible. You want to be believable. And that's a big, big thing. And that goes even for, in everyday life. You want to be somebody who's telling the truth. as a person or as a friend or, a student or anybody. So, these are all life lessons that really, really helped me in my journalism career. So I hope that helps everybody, and good luck getting your badge. And I appreciate Mr. Lawrence for asking me to speak with all of you about my career as a reporter and a news anchor. So I hope to talk to you guys soon. Again, my name is Marco Gonzalez, and I'll see you next time.